do, but what we are currently do as well.
Yeah.
That is the first step to
Okay, that is
anything short of a redistribution of the wealth is pure hypocrisy.
That's far
So what
fetched.
does that look like in a micro environment? What does that look like in a micro environment? Like we're in a room right now. We have a room full of a mix of white people and black people. We have businesses going on. Like, what are ways that we can do that in our certain circle right now?
Well, first of all, we have to make sure that those who actually control the society and make the major decisions are present during this conversation. So it just can't be everyday citizens there because we don't have the power to force concessions from big business and from government. We got to make sure there's representatives of Congress there. There's representatives of these multinational corporations that are there. We have to make sure that all the true players are involved so that the decisions that are made at this round table are in fact enforceable. Because we can come up with a blueprint, we can come up with a plan, but it means absolutely nothing unless it is enforceable. We have to make sure that it is enforceable.
But doesn't that require us to rely on corporations? Like, because Donnell owns his own business, you own your own business, I own my own business. We're all operating right now together. Mm-hmm. Isn't there a way that we can operate or have conversations and take the power that don't require corporations?
Well, but you still have to deal with the fact that many of America's major corporations had direct investment in. Some of them were created through the institution of slavery and Jim Crow. Yeah. Let's take Brooks Brothers Clothing for an example.
Yeah.
Brooks Brothers Clothing got their start by making clothes for the enslaved Africans on the plantations in the southern states. There's no getting around the fact that Bank of America, Wells Fargo, many of these financial institutions got their start in the trafficking of enslaved Africans. So we have to deal, with that reality. We have to deal with the fact that the United States government codified our enslavement, that they reduced us to articles of property and not human beings. Where is the reparations that are due to African people that will serve at the basis of this restitution?
We've been talking about reparations for years, and at the end of the day, it's my feeling that we never gonna get reparations. So what do we do? Why haven't we had it now?
Why do you feel that way?
Because I don't see the steps is going. I don't see the steps moving forward to get people to understand what our issues are and give us the money back. And in fact, I might be a little ignorant to this. You are probably way more knowledge than me this. But how do they do it? How do they do it with like a stimulus check? How do they give us?
No. For me, in my opinion, a cash payment, if there is to be one, should be at the bottom of the reparations package. It should not be the only thing, and it should not be the most important thing. Because America's money is not on the gold standard. It's not on the silver standard. It's not on any mineral standard. It is a promissory note. It is empty paper. And if we allow this government, this country, the most powerful country in the world, built on the backs of black labor, to pay us what they owe to our ancestors, the greatest crime in human history is going to be paid for with money that has no mineral equivalent, that would be a great loss to us. We should be paid land. We should be paid in resources.
But brothers going to take the money. They're going to take the money.
Industry.
They're going to take the money.
But then, for example, with the land argument, right? Like, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with Mugabe in Zimbabwe and that failed land experiment.
Yes. And I supported Mugabe in taking the land back from the white settlers because they had no right to be there in the first place. They were only able to get land in Zimbabwe as a result of colonization.
But then obviously you talk about inflation being a problem, but Zimbabwe had the worst inflation in history under Mugabe and the economy completely tanked.
Well, they also didn't control their own currency, as most African countries do not control their own currency. Their money is printed in Europe and it is maintained in European banks. So how can it truly be independence and sovereignty when your former oppressor, your colonizer, the countries that have raped your land resources and enslaved your people for 2, 3, 4 centuries, they control your economic process? That's a problem in and of itself. They gave Africa a flag and anthem independence. Africa has never had true independence. There cannot be true independence when you don't even print your own money.
But he did print his own money, and that's why he had the worst inflation in history, right? So,
well, they sabotaged him. The World Bank and the IMF in Britain, they sabotaged him, as they do all African countries. And if they can't sabotage you, they'll assassinate you, like Amilcar Cabral or Patrice Lumumba, whose assassination was ordered by President Dwight Eisenhower. And if they can't get to you to assassinate you, they'll just overthrow you like they did on Sachiko Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. The European countries of the world never want to see Africa strong, because a strong Africa is a weak Europe and a weak America.
Well,
This
right
country
now the whole
consumes
world war is
25%.
being fought in Africa, right? The Chinese and the Russians, they're investing so much money in Africa.
Absolutely.
And a lot
Everybody
more
wants
than we
peace
are, right?
because whoever controls, yes, sir, whoever controls Africa controls the world.
So isn't that
Whoever
just in
controls
great
Africa
antithesis to
controls the world.
isn't that just in direct antithesis to what you just said 30 seconds ago though?
Absolutely not. How so?
Because you're like the rest of the world wants to see a weak Africa, and then you're like whoever controls
Absolutely.
Africa controls the rest of the world.
Absolutely. Whoever controls the resources of Africa controls the world. Africa doesn't control her resources. The Congo doesn't control her coltan. South Africa doesn't control her diamonds. Caucasians control it. The same power that was in place during apartheid is the same power that is in place right now. Nothing changed in South Africa in 1994 except the flag and the color of the president. It's no different than a Barack Obama administration. All they did was give you a black face in a high place. There was no change in policy to benefit African people.
So you're trying to say that
during
Nelson Mandela did nothing?
presidency and not during Barack Obama's
So
presidency.
you're trying to say Nelson Mandela did nothing for South Africa?
Nelson Mandela did a whole lot as a youth. Post-incarceration, Nelson Mandela was a complete puppet of the Western powers, just like Barack Hussein Obama.
You said in